Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Julie Mann, and I show men and women how to lead healthy, happy, sustainable lives. And I'm really delighted because today I'm joined by Kendra Irvine. Hi, Kendra.
Hello.
Hello. So it all sounds very English with that hello.
I did? Oh. You're rubbing off on me.
Yeah, it's really good to see you. Now, for those of you that don't yet know Kendra, she works as a kinesiologist, fabulous, and also an Ayurvedic health counsellor. I just needed to get that right. So I think a great place to start, Kendra, would be to start with your life as you were growing up. Did you, were you brought up in a family where your parents were really health conscious?
I would have to say that's 50-50 to answer that. My dad, oh my gosh, no. He was like a junk food freak. He loved sugar. He loved like whipping cream was his big thing. He like macaroni and cheese, all the stuff that I pretty much don't endorse, especially in this day and age. My dad loved. So it was almost a complete opposite. And plus my dad was and still is a smoker. The other side of that, the other side of the spectrum there was my mom. Yes, almost like it was two polar opposite people, right? And hence why they haven't been together in 30 years. But my mom was kind of known in our small town as a health freak, right? And I was the daughter of the health freak. We didn't have sugar in our house. My mom made sure that we were enrolled in every sporting activity that we wanted to be in. So I got to try everything under the sun, and she made us healthy food all the time, always finding alternatives to things. I remember people having chocolate chips in their house, and in our house, it would be carob chips. I remember people having white sugar in their house, and in our house, it would be honey or maple syrup. And a lot of those habits I've carried throughout my life too, and into my early 40s. And so having that influence of not only the nutritional side of things with fresh vegetables and fruits from farmers markets, from our own backyard and our gardens, and participating in activities, not just sport, but things that are more expression focused as well. Things like dance, figure skating is a sport. It's more of an artistic type sport. And then other forms of artistic expression too. My mom always put her dollar and her support behind that. So I'd have to say, like, I got to see both worlds almost juxtaposed, and seeing which, what, if I made this decision, what would my conclusion be? What would my results be? If I made this decision, what would it be? Right. So it's sort of a lucky position to be in, to see both extremes and then make your choices of what feels right for you from there.
Yeah, I guess for some children that might have been quite a confusing message, but for you, it sounds like, you really had it sussed. So what other beliefs did you grow up with, Kendra, when you were young? Maybe not around food, but other beliefs that you grew up with.
I think that just the belief that there is something bigger than us, and that took a while to really cultivate, if you will, right? Like anything beyond the ego. When you're a little kid, you're in ego. That's the only space you really know how to live in, and the whole world revolves around you. And then as you start to grow up and, into your like 11th and 12th years, you start to think things more complexly, and you start to ask questions about, what is there besides me on this planet? And all these things that are happening can't just be as the result of the human in the physical form. There has to be this spiritual and emotional aspect to it. And so I think that was probably the slowest growing belief system that I had in terms of spirituality, because my origins of spirituality actually were more in religion, in Christianity. And we went to like home style kind of churches when I was little. I actually lived in a community that was off grid. Back in the day, off grid is like a buzzword these days, and everyone thinks it's kind of cool to live off grid. I lived off grid before it was cool. I didn't think it was cool. I didn't think not having electricity was cool. I didn't think not having running water was cool. I thought we were at a disadvantage. I didn't realize back then how connected to nature we really were as a result of how we were living. And then that connection to nature was ultimately sort of foundational for helping to build my connection with my spirituality, and therefore the belief system that I got from thoughts, from feelings, then comes beliefs, then comes the actions, and then results.
Totally. And I guess when you're a small child, we just want to fit in, don't we, and appear to be normal, whatever that is. So I can imagine how that might have been rather challenging, you know, thinking this was sort of such a weird existence, even though in hindsight you can see how wonderful it was actually.
In hindsight, yes, it took me a lot of years to be able to figure that out. And you nailed it on the head. I thought we were like the abnormal family in town because of the belief system, and because so many of my friends didn't follow that, didn't really understand the sort of the lifestyle that we did live, which was a lot more natural, a lot more off the grid. So I didn't really ever talk about it. I didn't really like invite people over a lot because we were kind of more of an anomaly. It was something that wasn't normal back then, and whatever normal is or was and still is, right, is still really much actually very relative to the individual. So that's not something that I really like openly walked around with and talked about and was proud of. In fact, there were times when I was ashamed of some of the things because we were such a minority and because I didn't feel like that part of my life fit in with mainstream.
Yeah, no, I can get that. And even though I don't expect you to answer the question, I'm kind of thinking, where was your dad in all this if you couldn't have sugar and you couldn't have, was he going out to eat every day? Anyway, no need to get into that. But what happened when you left home? And, you know, what's your story really up till now?
Well, when I left home, I actually, the first year I went to a local college and I was like, you know what, even as I'm doing this college thing, I'm getting into the college scene, I'm partying with people much older than me. I saw myself going down a path that wasn't a good one. And so I really just, in the middle of my studies, decided to do the gap year before I knew it was a gap year. And because I saw myself going on a path that wasn't favorable to my future, I was like way too ambitious and wanted more for my life. I saw myself going on a path that didn't align with that. So I basically escaped to Switzerland and I became an au pair for a bit. And that really just, in that time, I was using that experience to really figure myself out and use the travel to understand myself a lot more and grow my spirituality, which is my understanding of how I fit in the world, my purpose, my dharma, meaning, fulfillment, all of that. And then in that journey too, I also got accepted to skate in an ice show. And that actually was in all places in Puerto Rico. Ice and, palm trees don't typically go one on one, but it was a show, right? And so in all that, I knew that kind of lifestyle was going to be temporary and that I would be going back to the real world and getting back on track and doing the things I was supposed to do, the things that we are taught in school that we should be doing to be contributing to the better whole of society. See this road that I'm going down? The things that we were supposed to do is a lot of what is taught to us and a lot of the world that we live in growing up. And so getting back on track and going to university, that's what I did. Got to university, then I graduated university, I got married, and then I had kids in that order. 1, 2, 3, doing the things I thought I was supposed to do. And I think at one point I had talked myself into that, all of those things, I wanted it, right? Just so I could feel some sort of control over the decisions I was making. But my body knew otherwise. My body knew that that wasn't why I was put on this planet. It wasn't why I was, we'll call it spared. And maybe I can elaborate on that story in a bit because it adds to this. But it showed up in overwhelm. It showed up in me having a lot of resistance in my life and not getting the results, and not being able to figure out why, right? That I was in so much resistance. And it wasn't until I got to a point where it became too much. And then things just sort of spilled over. And I was kind of forced to get quiet, to get really quiet, because my body was asking me to slow down. It was showing up in all sorts of symptoms, like basically stress, anxiety. It was showing up in depression. It was even showing up on my skin. I had a whole bunch of like dry skin, eczema was showing up too. And so it was almost like psychosomatic. So that really forced me to slow down. And it was in that slowing down that I discovered, hang on a second, you're not living in alignment with why you're you're meant to be here. So what is it? Okay, what is it? I'm listening to the guides now. I'm listening to the universe. I'm listening to spirit. What is it that's meant for me? And so at that point, when I decided that I wanted to slow down, is when I really got the answer that I was looking for. And then that ultimately led me to go beyond kinesiology and then look into wellness, get certified as a wellness coach, because I was like, you know what, I'm talking about this every day. I live this wellness lifestyle. Why not share this with others and maybe make a career out of it? Like, duh, you've been doing this whole time right in front of you. Share this with other people. And it was in that journey that I found Ayurveda, and the rest, as they say, is history, because it has significantly changed my perspective on life, the way that I think, my feelings, my actions, and therefore my results.
Brilliant. So before we get into that, I just want to go back a little bit and just ask, what has been the most challenging thing specifically that you've had to overcome in your life?
I would have to say, like, my intuition is like getting out of my own way, and that's really global, because really, much of the time as humans, we have a hard time being accountable for our results, and it's easier to blame other people. It's easy to say it was the way I was raised, it was my parents, it was teachers, it was all that kind of stuff. But the biggest obstacle, I would have to say, on more of a global level, is learning how to get out of my own way and be responsible for my experiences and make better choices out of love versus fear. Because we're faced with those opportunities every single day of when we're making choices, either we respond with love or we're in fear. And it's up to us to be in our level of consciousness to recognize the decisions that we're making. If it's not in the best interest of me, it is not going to be in the best interest of my family, and therefore the public at large, if I am in my own way and stuck in my fear.
I can so relate to what you're saying, Kendra. And I believe now you're not in that marriage.
I am not in. So that was the second thing. So, like, as more of a spiritual global thing, I would say many of the times that's the toughest part that we deal with, is that emotional side, right? And yes, I did go through a divorce, which was the single hardest thing in life, the life happening that I went through. It's been 5 years now. And if anything, it's taught me so much about myself. I could have just been swept up with the stream of it and been like a struggling single person wallowing in self-pity. But I realized the reason for the divorce was ultimately to set two people that weren't meant for each other free, so that they could show their kids, I have 2 kids, so they could show their kids what unconditional love for the self looks like. And for him, he's in another relationship and he's now married. I am not. I took a lot of this time to heal a lot of the wounds and really take responsibility and acknowledge my contribution to my relationships, how I was showing up, and more importantly, how I was showing up for myself, which I wasn't before, not in the way that needed to be for me to really start to become more fully realized and understand my truth.
I absolutely love what you've said and the way that you've said it, Kendra. I think that's so, so powerful. So thank you for that. Okay, so I love kinesiology, but some people listening might think, what is that? So just tell us a little bit about what that is.
So kinesiology was actually I got my degree technically as a Bachelor of Physical Education. Physical education and the Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology are very, very similar. In fact, they're under the same umbrella with the Canadian Kinesiology Alliance. So I became certified under the Canadian Kinesiology Alliance, and in fact represented Canada as Vice President Education for that particular alliance. I used kinesiology in the form of exercise therapy. And so what that means is essentially a kinesiologist is an expert in human movement. And so where I used my knowledge was in a rehab clinic alongside physiotherapists. So they would do the assessments, they would do a lot of the manual therapy, some of the active stuff. And me as a kinesiologist or exercise therapist, I did pretty much all of the active treatment. So it's exercise therapy and kinesiology that helped a person return back to their pre-accident level of function so that they could return to work or what they were doing before in terms of sports. Most of the clients that I saw as a kinesiologist were people that got injured on the job. And in Canada, it's the Workers' Compensation Board that largely, that's the organization we were dealing with, and that sent clients our way. So that's the realm or the slice of pie of kinesiology that I worked with. Most people know kinesiology as like applied kinesiology, where you're doing like the biofeedback, for example, and working with that. And there's kinesiology in laboratories and that sort of thing. So there's different sectors. That's where I focused more, was on the active treatment side with my.
Yeah. So I've experienced kinesiology, and that's been simply muscle testing. Yeah. Okay. So Ayurveda. Now, I stayed actually for an anniversary that I had when I was married at an Ayurvedic center. I loved it. My husband absolutely hated it, but I love the food. I love the massages, the whole hanging out in the whole space. So what would you say to people who are not familiar with Ayurveda in a nutshell, Kendra?
To educate them about what Ayurveda is about and how it can help them, or
yeah. If someone was to say, what is it? What would you say?
Okay, let's start out with that. So the history of Ayurveda, I'll keep it as brief and succinct as possible. It's been around for 10,000 years. It is a sister science of yoga. Translated, it means life science. And literally what it posits to do is help people create a space for self-healing to take place. And it does that with the knowledge of nature. So in nature, we have 5 elements. Everything that you see around you, even like up to this little piece here, everything within our environment is a form of 5 elements or combination thereof. So the 5 elements are air, ether, what we know as space, fire, water, and earth. So since all of that exists in nature and every aspect of it is some sort of derivative of it, humans come from nature too. Animals from nature. Every living being has its origins in nature. So if humans come from nature and nature is made up of all of these 5 elements, it only is natural for that to be manifested or seen in the human being. So nature is this great, big, huge Mother Earth, this Mother Gaia that we live within as part of the system. And within the body, what that looks like is our body has air, ether, fire, water, and earth in it as well. So in nature, you might see earth as a tree or represented as the ground or a leaf. In our bodies, that's muscle, it's skin, it's teeth, it's hair, that's all earth. Another example is fire. Fire out in nature, we get that it consumes things. It's also responsible for decomposition. So in the fall, when the leaves start to break down, that is a metabolism or a decomposition of something. That's a processing. Within our bodies, that's our metabolism. It's taking in information via sound. When people are listening to the sound of my voice right now, that's fire occurring within the body. And of course, our digestive system is ultimately a function of fire. Now, with all of the elements that exist in nature, there are qualities to these elements. Wind has a very different quality than fire does or than the ground does. Wind it's light, it's unstable, and it's cool. Whereas we look at the ground, or say mud, for example, is cold, it's wet, it is stable, the ground is stable. So within our bodies, we have those qualities too. So with air within the body, that's circulation. Air is movement. Wind goes in whichever direction it flows. Our body has that movement as well. So circulation is one of them. And so that circulation helps to move things around within the body. How we understand that is actually within what most people will be familiar with that have some sort of that touched on Ayurveda, is within the doshas or the body constitutions. So there are 3. We've got Vata, we've got Pitta, and we've got Kapha. And in Vata is air and ether, and Pitta is fire and water, and in Kapha is earth and water. Some of us have more earth and water in our bodies. Some of us have more fire and water, and some of us have more air and ether. When we figure out how much of us is each of those elements, we understand that in nature, there's also an opposite. So for a hot, there's a cold. For a sharp, there's a dull. For a cloudy, there's a clear. So that exists in our body as well. Now, if I have more earth and water in my body, I'm going to have those qualities that are more dominant in my body. I'm going to be more fuller figured. I'm going to have really thick hair. My eyes are going to be huge. I'm going to have big plushy lips. That's going to be more presence of earth and water. I also will more likely go out of balance in those elements as well. The way that that is treated to bring a person back into balance, and isn't that what a lot of people look for, is balance or homeostasis, is with those opposite qualities. So if earth is more dense, it's cold, it's stable, the way that a person that has more of those qualities brings himself into balance if they're out is with, so I mentioned cold, stable, and dense. So hot, unstable, and light. And that's what brings a person that has more of those qualities back into balance. All you're using is the knowledge of Mother Nature.
I love it. It's so fascinating, Kendra, isn't it? I know you could talk for hours, and you're absolutely passionate about what you do. Just kind of having people have some understanding of it. But of course, I'm going to put all your links below this video.
Yeah.
Please just check Kendra out. So what would you say, in a nutshell, are the benefits of Ayurveda as opposed to the Western way of looking at things? You know, what, and also, why would someone choose to work with you specifically?
Well, the benefits of Ayurveda is really, Ayurveda is really non-judgmental, and it's one of the most compassionate healthcare systems that exists. The benefits, if we had to contrast it to our current medical system, first of all, it's been around for thousands of years. The current medical system is only a couple hundred years old. In fact, many of its principles come from the roots and origins of Ayurveda. Ayurveda sees things in terms of its basic understanding of nature and the qualities. So in the West, for example, we might call it arthritis. In the East, they would call it an imbalance of a pitta dosha. So what that means is, because what are the qualities of arthritis? Arthritis is hot, it's sharp, and it's unstable. So we treat that arthritis, or we treat that pitta dosha that's out of balance, to keep it in simpler terms, with the opposite qualities, because the body is always seeking to find this sense of harmony or balance, right? So when we understand the qualities that exist in nature and what balances them as the opposites, that gives us the sovereignty to self-heal. And that's what this system does, is it gives people the wisdom and the knowledge and the tools to be able to heal themselves, versus depending on a system that has failed us, sorry for that sort of biased opinion, over and over again when it comes to preventative health. Ayurveda gives us the sense of being able to practice our sense of accountability. And we kind of had talked about that before too, because you have to be accountable for your health. You have to realize that, hang on a second, the results that I'm getting because of this arthritis that I'm experiencing, or this excess of another part of a constitution I'm getting, is not leading me to good health. I'm, not happy. I'm suffering. I've got this anxiety, and I've been treating it with, just putting Band-Aid solution on it. Ayurveda is not a bandage solution. It goes after the grassroots of what's causing the imbalance and treats it at that level so that it doesn't show up in other ways. So really that kind of contrasts the two.
I love that, because it's all then about ownership, really. Yeah. And I love that. So I also said, what is it specifically about you, Kendra, that you think people, why do you think people would come and see you? What do you offer that's different from another Ayurvedic practitioner, health counsellor?
I have to say, like, that really is, there's 7.8 billion of us on the planet, and we all have a different perspective in how we show up and serve other people. Now, nobody has the life experience that I have, first of all, so I'm bringing in my own brand that way. Second of all, there are a lot of really talented Ayurvedic practitioners out there, some more so than myself. And that's not throwing me under the bus, it's just being realistic. We all have our own approach. It's whoever you align with and gravitate towards, and it's the energy. It is ultimately how I make a person feel when they listen to me or see me or watch my body language, right? That's going to be a deciding factor, because it's not about me. It's about the value that they can get that will add to their life at the end of the day. I will say that the approach that I have is I've got a coaching background. So I started out in wellness. I started with human movement. I've also been trained in emotional freedom techniques. So I can add to that layer the subtle doshas in Ayurveda. And work with more of the subtle energies too. I've been in the industry for over 21 years, which it feels like it dates me, being only 4 years old, but this has been my life, and it has been how I've done my life. So I live, practice, eat, breathe, sleep, run, drink Ayurveda on a daily basis. This is how I choose to show up in the world as a beacon, and I share that love and I transcend that knowledge through these thousands of years of the practice of Ayurveda. And that ultimately at the end of the day is going to serve the other person, because if I'm nourishing myself based on its practices, but I'm also being compassionate when I fall off the wagon, so to speak, there's this sense of the blend of the knowledge of the East with how we can make it practical for everyday living in the West. Because at the end of the day, we don't live the kind of lifestyles where we can go if we're, perplexed about a problem. It's not like I can run up into my cave and spend 7 days there trying to meditate on it and come out with it, right? It needs to be a practical system that we can use on a daily basis, and that's exactly how Ayurveda is successful. It's a slow and steady wins the race approach, and that's exactly how I approach it with my clients. And it's working in incremental steps, so the baby step approach. So someone may not be able to apply all the principles on a daily basis, but what can they do to mitigate the results that aren't getting them what they want on a daily basis? How can someone that has a 9-to-5 job make Ayurveda work for them? There's so many different tweaks that you can make into their life, in your lifestyle, that make it work for you. And it also helps us to realize where we're putting our priorities, because if our priorities don't align with what we truly want, then we're living essentially out of vibration with what is possible for us. And so having that understanding, I traveled to India, I learned about the system there, and I've learned from Dr. Vasant Lad, who brought it to the West as well. So I think really when we talk about what different Ayurvedic practitioners have to bring to the table, is really just a level of passion and how true they are to their own system that they use to help other people. That's probably a pretty vague way of answering that question.
No, I think that was great. What do you love most about what you do?
I love that it comes back to the basic application of a very intricate system. My favorite thing that I do is working individually with the soul, the person, the private work that I do with people. And then seeing them making recommendations, having them go out and tell them doing what I'm telling them to do, come back and seeing the results of the actions that they're taking is it's goosebumps. When you get goosebumps and something feels really good, and that you've served, and that they're being served and they're seeing the results, that is my absolute favorite part of it. I could eat that up all day long.
Brilliant. What do you do when you're not working?
I run and I read and I play with my kids. And when possible, I travel or get out into the mountains and go back to Mother Nature from where we came, and really just reset and bring those battery levels back up. And, I sleep. I have a good sleep schedule. That's foundational. I sleep when I'm not working. Go figure, hey? But really just anything that I can do that nourishes the spirit and brings joy to my life.
Perfect. One last question, Kendra. When you're no longer on this planet, how would you like to be remembered?
When I'm no longer on this planet? Well, I would like to be remembered as someone that gave people inspiration to want to stand up for themselves and really be in their own power and recognize that they have an innate ability to heal themselves. And if that's the sort of the legacy that I leave behind, is this innate understanding of personal power that we can actually step up to the plate for ourselves in our own life. If that's a legacy I leave behind for one person, then I've done my job on this planet.
Fantastic. It's been such an education and totally wonderful talking to you. Kendra Irvine, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Namaste.